Thank you very much. I'm Canadian, and a lot of people say that we apologize too much, but I will start with an apology because I've lost my voice somewhat. So I'm afraid I can't speak louder than this. I hope you will hear me and bear with me. Thank you again for being here. Thanks especially to Corinna for your wonderful organization and assistance throughout, and to my brilliant fellows who are scattered throughout the room here, and the entire Morphomata team. And thank you so much, Wolfram Nietzsche, for serving as a respondent for my talk. I appreciate it very much. My thanks, of course, to Gunther Blamberger and Dietrich Boschung. I'm excited to speak with you all about my current book project. This work touches on a few key concepts, including portraiture and auto or self-portraiture. Of these concepts, perhaps time, its evocation or realization through the moving image and cinema, is the most important. Alongside time, the films and images with which I work expose various paradoxes of life and experience, death and survival, memory and forgetting, horror and beauty, fragility and yet indestructibility, joy and yet also loss. All of these are layers of life that collectively comprise familiar and indecipherable aspects of existence. And so what do I mean by auto-perception? Auto-perception is a term I proposed in my first monograph that closely relates to the concept of affect, to experiences that exist before we know what they are. When speaking of affect, we might refer to the audible, visual, and tactile transformations that are produced in reaction to a certain situation, an event, or a thing. Affect is a transitory experience that occurs prior to a fixed idea. Affect is not, for example, the color red, but it would be the sensation of redness that we experience when we taste or see blood. In film, we might consider this to be a two-way process, so that we affect a film inasmuch as we are affected by it. We affect a film by bringing our own memories, experiences, subjectivities to the act of watching. And these work on the film while the film works on us. If auto-affection refers to a becoming conscious of ourselves and other things in relation to affecting and being affected by such transformations, I know it's heavy going, but I'll try to break it down. Auto-perception refers to a camera consciousness. Cinema's perception of itself as it experiments at the limits of what it can do beyond conventional action and narrative. This is a type of reflexivity, we could say, that also demands a consciousness of ourselves watching the film. What does it mean when such perception happens through a film? This means that a film makes clear its own act of seeing, and moreover, its perception of itself. Increasingly, and we obviously see this more in non-mainstream and avant-garde cinema, the camera's gaze opens outwards towards filmmaker, camera, and viewer. Earlier this year, at film scholar, critic, and video artist Adrian Martin's invitation, I co-edited a special journal issue for Screening the Past, a peer-reviewed journal of screen history, theory, and criticism. My colleague, Sage Walton, and I entitled our issue, Materializing Absence in Film and Media. When considering the concept of representation and experiences that actually defy straightforward linear representation, experiences such as memory, loss, or illness, the words of certain artists, thinkers, and philosophers immediately came to my mind. For instance, following the death of his beloved mother, French literary theorist, linguist, semiotician Roland Barthes wrote in his diary, October 29, 1977, in the sentence, "She's no longer suffering," to what, to whom does she refer? What does that present tense mean? The words of French philosopher Gilles Deleuze also came to mind. Some context for this quotation. In 1988 to 1989, Deleuze agreed to participate in an 8-hour interview series with his former student Claire Parnay, on the condition that the television broadcast of the interviews would occur after his death. In fact, the interviews were shown, with Deleuze's permission, on the Arte channel between November 1994 and spring 1995, just before Deleuze's suicide in November 1995. I'd like to share brief moments from this dialogue between Deleuze and Mourning with you. And the quotation that I share here on screen indeed refers to a seeming paradox that is essential for my project. The artist is the one who liberates a life, a powerful life, a life. That's more than personal. It's more than his or her life. Often when we think of autobiography or portraiture, we think of the personal details of a life. There is the quest to ascertain, to know, and to finally conclude on the attributions of a life. But of course, we who are but constructions of various discourses are always more than just the boxes we might check off on an official form. We are more than just a single category of gender, sexuality, color, class, nationality, age, and so on. From here, relations between an artist, be it a writer, filmmaker, painter, musician, and so on, and their works become interesting or more interesting. What then of the role of the viewer or reader of a text, as Barthes famously asks, vis-a-vis the life of a text, be it a book or a film, that exists in and of itself, has created and released by an artist, that then takes on a life of its own beyond that artist. In other words, what can we make of the relation between an artist and her work? When and how does the personal transition into an impersonal life? So let's turn now to this excerpt. As you'll see, the director of the TV recording left in moments where the film reel runs to an end, while the voice and Deleuze's voice continue. How can a portrait, moreover a self-portrait, counter and resist these dangers of life to which Deleuze refers, our daily threats of suffering, vulgarity, cruelty, stupidity, and war itself? And how, again, can the evocation of any personal life be always also an evocation of life itself, the world from which it derives? If, on the one hand, we have the singularity and intimacy of a very personal life, on the other is the simultaneous extension and folding of that most personal life, personal memory, into a memory of the world, an architecture of time and memory. How can a portrait express the ways that each moment of virtual past impersonal world memory coalesces with our actual lines of personally lived time? How to conceive of a time between the past and the future, a time where we see time in its fullness, achronologically, and perceive ourselves in time, like we might during a car accident, or when we witness the death of another life, or via any experience through which we come face to face with the fragility of our own lives and yet the persistence of memory, time, and of course, art. All you have is time, Belgian film artist Chantal Akerman once told an interviewer. In my films, you are aware of every second passing by through your body. You are facing yourself. In October 2015, I was on a plane from Sydney, Australia, with the final destination of Providence, Rhode Island in the US. When I reached one of the airports that I was passing through between LA and Providence, I read on my phone of the news of Akerman's suicide. She was 65. In that same year of 2015, Akerman's final film, No Home Movie, premiered. The film records, as Akerman's works often do, Akerman's relationship and ongoing conversations with her mother, Holocaust survivor Natalia Akerman, who died shortly before the film was released. Once again, Akerman's film foregrounds time's persistence. It never occurred to us, reflect filmmakers Joanna Hogg and Adam Roberts, that when we watched Chantal Akerman's final film, No Home Movie, for the first time, not only would we be mourning the death of Akerman's mother, but mourning the death of the filmmaker herself, which feels almost like the death of cinema. You can read into this film whatever you like, an image of a tree moving violently in the desert wind, its branches always springing back, is an image of survival, yet there are no survivors here. End of quote. During No Home Movie's opening shot, which you are now watching, of approximately 4 minutes, a handheld camera lingers on a desert, the camera's near stillness at odds with the force of the wind against the branches in the immediate foreground screen left. Evidence of human life exists in the passage of 3 cars that will be seen in a few minutes over here. Like, she really wants you to feel the time, so you have to wait for it. But human life exists in the passage of these 3 vehicles that are nearly indiscernible in extreme long shot through this wind-blown, dusty frame. I get advanced so you can see the cars, but you probably won't see them anyhow, so I'll just... Let's cut now to Canadian experimental filmmaker Philip Hoffman's 2001 film, What These Ashes Wanted. What These Ashes Wanted, the screen reads, I felt sure was not containment, but participation. Not an enclosure of memory, but the world. Mark Doty reads the opening shot, white text on black. Inscribed within these 2 films, Akerman's No Home Movie and Hoffman's What These Ashes Wanted, are experiences of transience and home, illness and mourning. And yet persistent throughout these works are also flashes and images of enduring life and duration that emerge, as I'll attempt to suggest tonight, through instances of filmic self-portraiture and self-perception. Here we have Barth's entry from April 12th, 1978, and it reads, Necessity of the Monument. Remember that she lived. To these words, we might add, remember that she lived and lives. The moments that I'll share from these films tonight offer glimpses of other worlds, especially during moments of self-portraiture and self-perception. It is within these fleeting and briefest moments of self-portraiture in the films that we might locate possibilities for difference, for alternative trajectories and futures, especially for the women of these works. Possibilities for difference with reverberations that long linger. The opening sequence of Hoffman's What These Ashes Wanted, with silent footage of the filmmaker and his late partner, this is his late partner, Marion McMahon, seems to us both familiar by the immediacy of its home movie aesthetic and playfulness, and intensely private and vulnerable through this evocation of past intimacies known only to this couple. Prior to ubiquitous iPhone and Instagram moments, staged repeatedly to simulate spontaneity, these people in the snow seem almost too real, present, and alive. The film script, in fact, reads home movie color, here at the bottom, home movie color of a woman and a man, and the woman is Marion, the man is Philip, at a schoolhouse, playing it up to the camera in home movie style. To cut back to Akerman's film, at 6 minutes, 5 seconds into Akerman's film No Home Movie, the film cuts from a handheld high-angle shot of a backyard to a close-up shot from behind Natalia Akerman, Chantal Akerman's mother. Natalia pushes a door screen left and enters the living space. A camera, Chantal, her daughter, follows Natalia before stopping at the doorway. While the camera records this modest entry into an apartment's open space, the relation between the subject, the mother, and the camera, the daughter, reveals both the comfort, obviously, of a family home and a hesitant urgency to fully witness, capture, and hold dear. The camera's slight sway in Akerman's hands suggests at once a materiality of experience, as we just saw in the home movie footage of What These Ashes Wanted, and the delicate ephemerality of a present that's always already lost. Such felt proximity to transient subject, space, and time in these early moments of Akerman's final film, with its Akermanesque rhythm of extended long take and sudden break, enacts the flow between intimate, real-life duration and the insistent minimalism of an artist devoted throughout her career to an ethics of a very frontal gaze. She often filmed her subjects very frontally on. You see them directly. This seeming formalist, realist juxtaposition of No Home Movie's opening sequence intensifies through an alternation between fluid movement, as we just saw in the opening of Hoffman's film when they're frolicking in the snow, and painful stasis, like in moments such as these minimalist tableaus and stills of domesticity and illness that exist in Akerman and Hoffman's films, respectively. Elaine Scarry writes, "Pain comes uncherably into our midst, has at once that which cannot be denied and that which cannot be confirmed. I want to be near the water. We bundle up and leave the hospital for the beach. Beautiful, clear, crisp, blue-skied night, we mourn together, laughing at intervals, clinging madly to some sense of life. The open sky, water makes me feel part of something immeasurable, larger than me, and it is consoling." Marion McMahon. Whichever way we turn, it seems hard to capture the features of a subject that is searching for itself, writes film theoretician Raymond Belleur, with regard to cinematic self-portraits and ongoing talk of subjective cinema and of autobiography. As Belleur observes, autobiography in fact disappears by way of self-portraits. Portraits of family and friends, letters, travel diaries, private news, diaries, confessions, childhood memories, filmmakers' journals. What are left are instances of filmic self-portraiture that pierce and affront. They are flashes of a lifetime linked to the very precariousness of a subject. My sense is that through these films, through a subject's shadows and the frailty of its imaging, and they are frail inasmuch as these images resist full sight and knowledge, just as one's all-too-human pain eclipses straightforward and literal representation. Through these, we glimpse not fixed truth, but ceaseless questionings, waves, foldings, and layerings of time, memory, and affected absences that forever remain with us. Those who mourn and are mourned via these films of Akerman and Hoffman experience not only the other's absence, but the film's self-portraits also vacate the self. They manifest an absence to oneself, that absence any sustained narrative. This reveals a new sense of time, a totality of time that opens to new fictive worlds and possibilities. Fiction, as Belleur asserts, becomes the only place in which to learn, to understand what true stories can tell. Or, as Deleuze discerns, the false becomes the mode of exploration of the true. Unflinching gazes at pain and loss in Akerman's No Home Movie and Hoffman's What These Ashes Wanted has materialized through the film's landscapes, the photographs, the doorways, the silences, the stillnesses in homes once active but now desolate, may seem abstract and removed. But these images endlessly transition between the embodiment of a most personal human gaze, subjected to pain, and, as I've suggested to you tonight, an impersonal, overarching perception that exceeds the confines of the deserted homes. Truths here again pertain not to authenticity or lifelong, complete personal narratives, but self-realizations in moments no more profound than one's encounter with death. Insofar as the film's evocation of pain, memory, and quest for self and truth speak to circuits between personal and impersonal, intimate, universal, present and past future, as well as to viewer character film, they reveal that cinematic potential to directly present time's perpetual duration. By so doing, these self-portraits expose ourselves to ourselves. Recall the opening shot that I shared with you of What These Ashes Wanted with poet Mark Doty's white text on black. Following that shot, the first moving images of Hoffman's films are set, if you also remember, against the brick wall of the schoolhouse on the left. Recalling, in fact, the first moment of Alan Schneider and Samuel Beckett's 1965 film called Film, the latter film given firstly to the problem of being perceived by human or non-human alike. The character can limit the danger, writes Deleuze on Schneider and Beckett's film, its opening moments seen here, by walking along the wall. In this way, he leaves only one side unprotected. Deleuze continues in his essay on Schneider and Beckett's film, quote, "To make a character walk along a wall is the first cinematographic act. All the great filmmakers have attempted it. Indeed, so too has Philip Hoffman. Both film and What These Ashes Wanted commence with canted framings and seconds of dizzying speed that seek the subject of the camera's perception against brick walls. Their tactile textures made more haptic by the swift movements and nearness of pursuing camera and pursued subject, veiled or hooded Buster Keaton or Marion McMahon, respectively, alongside the hard surfaces. With all perception, has such being the perception of perception, as Deleuze reminds, insofar as we do not perceive without being perceived. From its outset, What These Ashes Wanted makes clear its own act of seeing and, moreover, its own perception of itself. For while Hoffman's persistent handheld camera incessantly interrogates Marion in sequences throughout the film, increasingly the camera's gaze opens outwards towards filmmaker himself, camera and viewer. A doubling process again, or folding, occurs that comprises both the externalization of a self's becoming other beyond itself, through its intensifying perception of a greater immeasurability, this immensity of time and life, and an internalization that enfolds such perception into a larger collective universal memory and possible future. Quote, "This then is what was so terrifying. That perception was the perception of the self by itself," writes Deleuze. "If you could have a ritual for death, what would it be, and would it be private or shared?" Marion asks Philip. "I think it would be shared," he replies. Through the act of living with and sharing Marion, his late partner's death, Hoffman seems to engage in a simultaneous act of self-reconstruction and dissolution. After Marion's death, he is urged to heal swiftly, as suggested by these rapidly cut images following the title screen, and these images of Hoffman's hands as he sorts through pieces of broken pottery. However, just as Hoffman's own image can in fact be glimpsed in some of these broken mirrored pieces, the film also motions to a contrary sense of time, to an alternative speed of recovery and progress, as seen through Marion's own resistances to being othered or objectified. A sequence film during which Marion drives, with Hoffman in the backseat filming, to the next Torontonian home she'll visit on her nursing rounds, elicits the following exchange.
I can't even go to the bathroom because there's so much junk around. I go to the bathroom and someone's got a pair of poopy underwear soaking in the sink, you know. Where am I going to wash my hands? So I kind of run my fingers under the tap and wet them. The camera is human, but it performs the same kind of. Except it's not working on me. My physical experience working on a psychological experience. So on that side, it's different. My physical experience. And on your physical experience, yeah. It's really hard for me to do this, you know? Yeah. I feel like I have to entertain you. No, it's not that I feel like that's not really what I mean to say. What
It's forcing, right?
Yeah, I feel like I'm not really talking about things that I want to talk about. Things that I want to talk about with you.
Yeah, because you're talking to the camera.
Yeah. You know?
Well, it's hard for me too.
Maybe we should have somebody filming us. Yeah. filming you, filming me, talk about our hard. Why is it hard for you?
Because this is hard.
Heavy?
Yeah.
Oh, Philip, there I am talking about psychological difficulties, and you're talking about physical ones. You're nuts. You really are nuts. Sometimes I think you're so insensitive, honestly.
Well, what I'm saying is I'm concentrating on this, which makes me, not concentrate on what you're saying or interact.
Well, that's a little different than saying it's hard for me because the camera's heavy. It's a little different, you know. Do you understand the difference?
As Brenda Longfellow observes, by way of Jacques Derrida's acknowledgement, that within the act of mourning, the other is always an object, image, idol, or ideal, that one constructs oneself. At this point, Marion confronts Phil, hiding behind his heavy 3/4-inch camera in the back seat, accusing him of not understanding how difficult it is to be filmed and how much the camera mediates and makes strange their relation. It is an important moment, Longfellow writes, precisely because it honors the otherness of the other. The only sync sequence in What These Ashes Wanted, in fact, this sequence anchors Marion in her life world, not simply as an image, idol, or memory, but as a sensate and intentional subject in her own right, and one, furthermore, who explicitly defies the naturalness of the camera recording her image. In speeds, therefore, of conjoined mobility and immobility that link every future breath with every former sigh, What These Ashes Wanted achieves an undoing of assured subjectivity of both Marion's and the filmmaker's own. In close and extreme close-ups, Hoffman's hands tend the broken pieces while the film cuts on the sound of an answering machine's tone to slowed home movie footage of Marion walking past columns in front of an Egyptian monument, as the screenplay notes. These are the film's first moments of audio, heard against Marion's seemingly majestic stride by its slowness and the image's studium, its grandeur in sepia tones. The audio is a man's voice, heard quoting from a book, as he describes an ancient broken cup too precious to discard.
I found this in a book and thought you might like to hear it. Here goes. When I call up pictures of friends who are lost, a terrible ache comes over me, so much so that It has to go away on its own. There isn't much by way of remedy that I can do. I remember a letter of Henry James where he said that in times of great grief, it was important to go through the motions of life, and then eventually they would become real again. I've been trying to write myself a poem about those ancient Japanese ceramic cups, rustic in appearance, the property at some point of a holy monk, one of the few possessions he allowed himself. In a later century, someone dropped and broke the cup, but it was too precious simply to throw away. It was repaired not with glue, but with a seam of gold solder. And I think our poems are often like that gold solder, repairing a break in what can never be restored perfectly. The gold repair adds a kind of beauty to the cup, making visible part of its history. I guess that's it. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Inasmuch as What These Ashes Wanted documents Hoffman's reclamation of self and memory fragments through the making of this film, the temporal past-future divide persists. And at last, at approximately 54 minutes into the film, the first frontal clear shot of Hoffman, a self-portrait, surfaces while several frontal shots of Marion repeat throughout the film. Even as the film's entirety serves as a portrait of the temporal divide between definitive death and ongoing dying with its lasting affective embrace, as we might think through Maurice Blanchot, this still self-portrait at the film's end effects and demarcates the film's interwoven making and unmaking of a self. How to assess the state of the I in cinema, asked Deleuze. The most fruitful response again lies through creative memory and time, we might say. I will not tell you what I have done, but I will tell you who I am, writes Deleuze. Of this sense of a self's endless becoming in time, between moments and ever in flux, and this self-portrait, Deleuze's remarks seem apropos. It is more direct and more real than a written narrative could ever be, with that face staring at you and saying, I am me, and that used to be me. On the other hand, this former self never seems to really join the self who is speaking to us. If the journey of What These Ashes Wanted is to grant form to chaos, presence to absence, the task remains an impossibility. But by this final confrontation of the films, seen against the sound of a film projector, we are reminded that this self and his image exist in time. In pursuit, perhaps, of a beloved other's truth, he creates his own and releases hers to chance. To quote from the passage of the film entitled 17, 17 is the number. 1 plus 7 is 8. 7 is doing. 8 is infinity. 17 is the number. She was born on May 17 and died on November 17. A self to which it would be worth her while to be true, Marion McMahon, May 17, 1954 to November 17, 1996. So you can, again, read whatever you like into No Home Movie or What These Ashes Wanted. But to return briefly to Akerman's No Home Movie, the film is not, as its title reiterates, a home movie. And temptation, again, might be to label the film autobiographical. However, despite its autobiographical materials of space, subjects, and home, filmed with Akermanesque distant proximity, stasis within domestic borders, has interspersed with long takes of blustery landscapes, deserts, and fields, Akerman's final film materializes not only as a portrait of the filmic medium and perception itself, has evidenced as well by Hoffman in What These Ashes Wanted, and in the spirit of Beckett's film, but it also portrays Akerman's self in time. No Home Movie persists as a moving, ceaselessly questioning self-portrait of both the medium and artist that captures fractions of the soundscapes and landscapes that comprise Akerman's world. This is not, or no longer, home, but this is Akerman. The film has conceived by Akerman. Approximately 1 hour and 3 minutes into the film, Akerman's self-portrait surfaces in opaque water. Footage that the film revisits from Akerman's 2013 autobiographical installation, MANIAC SHADOWS. The press kit to Akerman's installation claims that MANIAC SHADOWS brings a new complexity to Akerman's forte, the portrayal of the disjunction between subjective voice and objective vision. But I would disagree. For such a tension was always already there in Akerman's works that emanate from the deeply personal outwards to worlds and its injustices Akerman captures, and back to a world with its own pains and sufferings writ as large. The internalization-externalization process is there, forever intertwined. From this perceptive doubling of artist and medium, we see again ourselves seeing other subjects and Akerman herself across several of her films, notably and lastly, No Home Movie. Instead then of reading into the film, might we instead experience the encounter with such a portrait, not as some enticement to know and to claim, but rather merely to observe and listen with as much humility. With regard to Deleuze's proposed 3 syntheses of time, the first synthesis is that of habit and chronology, on which conventional conceptions of past and future depend, and the second synthesis pertains to memory and constitutes time as a pure past, which causes the present to pass. Yet most interestingly, in the third synthesis, the present, Deleuze writes, is no more than an actor, an author, an agent destined to be effaced, whose loss of self always corresponds to a future. From No Home Movie to What These Ashes Wanted, the materialized absences of Chantal and Natalia, Philip and Marion project immemorially towards a filmic future. Thank you.